We will call to order the regular board meeting of the Board of Election Commissioners for the City of Chicago. Good morning. My name is Marisel Hernandez. I'm the chairwoman. Seated to my left is Commissioner Jonathan Swain, and to my right is Commissioner William Kresse. Next on the agenda is the consideration of the agenda. I will move to defer under new business subsection A until a later meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Next item is the approval of the regular board meeting minutes of September 25th, 2018. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes and the minutes are approved. Next is the Executive Director's report. Mr. Gough.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Just to let the board members know that we're still counting the November election, but we're getting ready for our mayoral election. Just to let the board members know that we're revisiting our early voting sites. I was very disappointed in some of them. The long lines that we had, and with the weather that we're having right now, can you imagine people standing outside for 2 hours? So we may add some more early voting sites to our list. I just want to let the board members know I'm working on it now. Hopefully in another week I should have
More sites, not more equipment?
more sites.
More sites, okay.
The sites are just too small. And look at 175 with 88 pieces of equipment. We still had lines 3 blocks long. And it's something that it's happened all over the country, but I think it's something we need to take care of.
So you have more than one site per ward, or just larger sites?
We may have more than one site per ward.
If we can get
If
a
we can get
larger
it, yeah,
site.
yeah. So
And-
we're going through a whole list of locations now. It's something that has to be done.
And Mr. Gough, can you explain a little the problems that we have had trying to find a larger location?
You know, it's hard to get a location for 18 days. I mean, who's gonna let you go in for 18 days up till, the last week up till 7 o'clock at night?
And
It's hard to
even-
find places.
Even with the Park District, we've had our problems.
Yes, we have.
Obstacles with them.
Right, so it's something that I'll be tackling it this week, and hopefully we can get that taken care of.
Were the number of voters at early voting significantly higher than we've had in the past?
Oh, we
Almost
were.
doubled, right?
Well, relative to a presidential election, it wasn't as high, but it was nearly as high as the 2008 presidential election. We had 223,000 compared to 240,000. That was our breakout year. The challenge was in check-in stations, getting people checked in, and then whether or not we had enough units. So if the Park District or library or other facility, we're grateful to have it for 18 days, but if they're only going to give us X number of square feet, you can't jam in there more pieces of voting equipment. You can't move all of the poll workers out to the hallway so they can't be assisting voters and responding to their needs. So it's a space issue everywhere. There were people contacting us when the lines went really exceptionally long. It started the Saturday before Election Day. And the 44th Ward, 47th Ward, 46th Ward, in particular, you had 2-3 hour lines, people waiting under umbrellas.
But isn't part of that driven by the length of this the last ballot we had?
That's
Part of it is.
Part of it is.
Part of it
I mean,
is.
this new ballot's gonna be, that ballot took 12 minutes to do. The ballot for the mayoral should take all of a minute and a half.
And even with the review, you're talking about 3 minutes per voter on the
this
machine.
is a
Because you're
sample.
voting for mayor, city clerk, city treasurer, and maybe a referendum or two.
That's roughly a sample of what the ballot is for this upcoming election. But even with that, we need to, we'll have a better time with this upcoming election, but you have to think for 2020. So what we want to put in place is for 2020.
Oh, okay, okay.
So we might as well start tackling this now.
Do we have any information on whether people tend to vote at the early voting site in their ward as opposed to other wards?
They do.
They do. So maybe we should also get the word out, you can go to any of the early voting sites.
Well,
It's, you know, and that
Not
would
that that'll
work.
solve the whole.
if they would do that, it would.
Yeah, exactly, that would take a lot of the pressure off.
It's hard to convince people to, okay, we're not real busy in the 12th ward.
Right.
So do you want to head 4.5 miles south or 4.5 miles north, whatever the case may be? You know, into a different neighborhood. It's not,
I say this because I visited a number of the early voting sites, and I've seen the lines, and I've told people in line, you know, you could go to over there, there's no line, and they're like, oh, I didn't know we could go over there. So I'm just saying, it might be nice, maybe even just put signs outside the early voting sites saying, you know, you can go to any of these, you know, if this line's too long. So just throwing that out there.
I will say this, there was kind of a quiet resolve. We did not receive a lot of complaints. We knew it was happening
Yeah.
because, especially at closing time, when we were supposed to close at 5, the last person in line didn't get out to vote until 7:55. So there was a people were just looking down in their cell phones and keeping themselves occupied. There was it was kind of an eerie phenomenon
In 40-degree weather.
in 48-degree weather, yes.
Right, versus,
In drizzle.
versus
29 degrees.
29-degree weather.
Yeah, and
Or-
that's why
or
we
less-
need,
worse.
and that's why we need to concentrate on this now.
Yeah.
And I think I think one of the items we should stress is vote by mail went real well. We've got an 82% return on our vote by mail. So if somebody does not want, I have never seen 82% for a midterm election.
I mean, so far, we still have some.
Right.
We have some, but
Okay.
we're getting some where no postmarks are on there, and it's definitely late. But it's something that we need to concentrate on that also. So those are the items we're working on. Hopefully we'll have a debriefing in another week of what happened. We're gonna do some changes in personnel assignment for the upcoming elections. We also are gonna have a walkthrough because, as you know, the 19th is the first day to file nominating petitions for mayor, city clerk, city treasurer, and alderman. And we think on the lower level, we should have roughly about 400 to 500 people on that one day. So we're gonna set up the stations and start working on this now. So hopefully by this weekend, we'll have everything in place, ready for the 19th. And that's basically what I have. Some other items that I'm working on, I'll send you copies in writing of what we're doing right now. So I just want to let the board know.
Well, I just want to say that there were a lot of challenges that we faced in this election. Dealing with early voting. Election day was pretty busy. Whereas, I think we can normally see a dip in the middle of the day. It seemed like it was pretty consistent throughout the day. So in spite of all the, in spite of the issues we had, we managed to bring in the results, on time, with minimal issues. And we had our staff out there. They worked really hard. I don't know if people realize, that our staff during the last, 3 to 4 weeks, they're working 7 days a week, some of them. In the last week, 18 hours a day.
We still are,
Some,
though.
yeah, that's what we're doing now. And it's, a staff of
30.
130 something employees. That's our core staff. And they are dedicated. And so, I salute them and, for a job well done in spite of the issues we may have had. And thank you, Mr. Gough, for, you know, directing them and making sure that, you know, we were able to get the votes in and tally them on a timely basis. So thank you.
We were 80% in before 11 o'clock. I mean, we hit a lot of milestones. And you have to remember, we had, last year we've had 16 key employees retire. And this was their first, the new people that took their spots, this was their first election. So there's still some things we need to do, need to adjust, but I think this upcoming mayoral election, you'll see it'll work a lot smoother. And I'm just hoping for the best, that's all.
Yeah.
Second, Chairwoman's remarks. He did a phenomenal job considering the number of voters and the size of our ballot. It was a phenomenal job. Thank you.
Just say, we've been doing this so long, we have to rethink how we handle elections. I think it's something that needs to be done.
Mm-hmm.
As Jim Allen said, this precinct-based system is just not working.
Right.
And it's going to, it's like a rubber band getting ready to pop. So
Yeah.
something we need to really work on.
Right.
Yeah.
Mr. Holliday is not here.
Mr. Holliday is at the warehouse doing the 5% recount.
Okay.
This was Mr. Holliday's basically first election. He did an excellent job, so we'll let you know.
And we have our communications director, Mr. Allen.
Good morning. So overall, it was a successful election. We had 59% turnout, or about 60%. That's the highest for a midterm election in 36 years. So you have to go back to Thompson and Stevenson running for governor to see this kind of higher, an even higher number. Vote by mail, as Mr. Gough referenced, was our highest ever, period. Higher than it was in World War II. And we had an exceptional return rate. The ones who didn't return, for the most part, we haven't gone through the data, but we have seen many of those just used early voting or voted in person at their precinct on election day.
How many were there? How many voted on election?
There were originally 121,000 applications. That ended up being slightly more than 116,000 as people peeled away and instead used alternate methods. They may have made a mistake on their ballot. They may have done something that, you know, otherwise it made them want to just vote early instead. The early voting numbers, as we referenced, were 223,000. That's 96% higher than the last midterm election. Not as high as the presidential, but still, it was a substantial increase from 2014. As you know, the 25 to 34-year-olds really took off this time. We haven't seen that high of a level of participation among that age group where they were a larger voter group than many. They started out a larger voting group as a percentage of our electorate, but still, in terms of being a larger number of voters participating than their elders, that's rather significant. We had fewer provisional ballots, I'm pleased to say. Approximately 1% of all ballots cast. We had about 8,000 provisionals. We think we can do and should do better with Election Day registration. Next, we had some problems on Election Day, especially with the distribution of 2 ballots. We've run out of ways to try to inform all of the judges. This wasn't a widespread problem, but it was bad enough that we documented at least 32 precincts. They were only handing out the candidate ballot and not the judicial retention ballot. And that's a problem, because then voters wonder if they can go back. If they do, they have to vote a provisional just on the B ballot. Then we have a hard time determining whether or not that we can accept that. Secondly, handing out the wrong ballot styles. Again, we send out letters to every precinct, every judge who works in a precinct, every election coordinator who is in a split precinct where there's more than one ballot style because of congressional, state rep, county board, district, you know, that cuts through the precinct. And we still have problems with that over and over again. We don't have these problems in early voting. We don't have these problems in vote by mail. We don't have these problems universally, so it's not a training issue, but we do have these with this precinct-based system where we're relying on 10,000 people who are only gonna get to do this 2 days out of the year. And it's the most important day. So, Mr. Gough, you know, I keep hammering away at it, and I can't emphasize enough that I think we need more vote by mail and more vote centers on election day. And I'm pleased that we didn't have any of the kind of the problems that we saw in McHenry or Portage, Georgia, Florida, North Dakota, where there seemed to be either vote counting issues or, you know, people being disenfranchised for various reasons.
You said 10,000, isn't the number actually higher, the number of people we hire for election day?
I'm rounding it, but yeah, it's, technically we hire about 11,000. I think about 10,000 actually show up. And I think you'll hear from one of our guests later today, an example of that.
Jim, how many split precincts do we have, or did we have about?
Gary, is it 382, I think it was? No.
Ballot styles?
No.
Split precincts.
Oh,
It was
almost 400 or 500 of them.
At least.
Or
So
500.
roughly 25% of our precincts have at least one split. Some have multiple splits. So there's a different, there might be 3 or 4 ballot styles. So, you know, getting the judges to remove all of those ballot styles, you know, to our credit, the way the poll system, we've tried to have a better detection system so that when the person is handed a slip of paper, it has the ballot style on there, and so our voters are more likely to detect that problem and say, I was supposed to get 118 and I was handed 113. So that's working out, but we're still having this issue pop up over and over again.
And if we get ballot on demand, that'll take care of it. So we're hoping with new equipment for 2020, we'll be able to tackle a lot of these problems. But
Right.
ballot on demand will take care of a lot of it.
And is there any way, like, you know, when someone goes on the website to say, you know, find out where they're registered, that we could have the ballot style number that they should be looking for on there?
That's a good question. We include it on the mailing. We include it on the sample ballot that you pull up on the website. So we're trying to get that word out there. And we even, on the mailing, we emphasize that we're going to ask for the A ballot and the B ballot, and gave the numbers for them. So we're trying. And then even the judges posted a sign in every precinct that said 2 ballots, and it had a human figure with 2 ballots, you know, showing examples. So between emails, letters, calls, signage that they have to post in the polling place, I'm not sure what more we can do.
Did we send a text message to all the poll books about it? Maybe that's another option, beginning of the day, just as a reminder.
We can do that.
How many ballot styles did we have for this election?
About
Gary?
400.
Right under 400, there's 396, I believe it
Yeah.
was.
Just for the record, can you explain what ballot on demand is?
Ballot on demand is where you can pull up, actually print a ballot that you need. So you'll have a laptop, you have a printer, somebody comes in, they look up Lance Gough, okay, you get ballot style 142. They hit 142, they print up a ballot, the judge then initials it, gives it to you, and then you go and vote it, and you put it in the scanner.
Our early voting largely works that way, where it's activating a card right from the voter registration, so there's no keying in of a number anymore.
Right.
You know, they insert the card, and it's based on where they live, and it gives them the right ballot style every time.
Right, and then there are also ones where you vote on a touch screen and then it prints out your printed ballot.
That's another device.
Right.
Jim, how many grace period registration do we have, and how many same-day registration we have?
I don't know about election day registrations yet, but I think we had about 12,000 grace period, 14,000. It was a solid number, but a lot of people are waiting until election day, which is fine. We had only 1 or 2 complaints where someone felt that they were processed, but they felt they were being treated a little, step to the back of the line, you should have taken care of this a long time ago, type of thing. But that was the exception, not the norm. Most of our voters who used election day registration, especially up by Loyola and U of C, we had no complaints out of any of the colleges, and those all had really high turnout numbers on those campuses.
Then the last thing I wanted to comment on is the lowest voting group was the 18 to 24-year-old
Right.
group, and I'm trying to figure out 18 maybe still in high school, seniors in high school possibly, or freshmen in college, maybe they're away. I don't know why it was so low.
Well, keep in mind, that's our smallest voter group because it's only 6-7 years, as opposed to the others that are 10 years. It's also when people are at the most mobile or transient stage of their lives, where they're going to school, they're starting a first job, they're moving from one apartment to another, they're moving out of their parents' home, back into their parents' home. So keeping their registrations up to date is a little more challenging than all of us who've probably been registered at the same place for 15 years or more. So that's a fact of life, but they are a smaller group, so just because they have a smaller number, don't read too much into that.
Okay.
Their participation rate was probably close to about 25-30%, which sounds horrible, but historically it's still very high.
And what was the same rate compared to the 25 to 34-year-olds?
I'd have to look that up, but
I'd like to
If
give
you can
a,
send that around with participation rates of all the different, the most recent numbers, that'd be great.
I'd like to give a tip of the hat to the University of Chicago, which worked with us on creating a new early voting site on their campus. They really wanted to have it. They were very helpful in setting it up and administrating it with us. They also participated in a nationwide sort of a contest among universities to get students registered, and they led the entire country. I think they had more than twice as many registrations as the second place university, which was Harvard, so I think they're glad to be able to tout that.
There you go.
So thank you, University of Chicago, for that. It was great.
Not only that, their location, they worked with us to make it 100% accessible, which nobody else has ever done that, put in new walkways and everything else to make it 100% accessible.
And how did Northwestern do in the Big Ten Challenge?
I don't know.
Okay.
They're out of our jurisdiction. I have more things to worry about in Chicago.
Well, not the downtown campus.
Well, yeah, the downtown, but they're largely us.
Okay, are there any further questions? Thank you both for.
Oh, I'm sorry, I do have one. To the judge's point, are the judges that we used most recently going to carry over to this next election, or will there be another recruitment effort to get judges?
That's a good point. This is the beginning of a 2-year term.
Right.
So they will carry over into the next 2 elections. So there will be a little more familiarity. We won't have the 2 ballot issue come February. We won't have different ballot styles. There are no split precincts unless you have a liquor question or something like that, a really rare instance. So, some of these problems are going to go away.
There will, however, be a little bit of recruitment, a little bit of new training. We're actually on the agenda later going to discuss a contract for a trainer to fill in holes, keep the numbers up.
I was going to say, I've been approached by people who say, hey, I hadn't thought about it, but I'd love to be a judge. So we're still accepting applications for people to be judged?
Yes, we will.
Yes.
We're always.
And coordinators.
Yes, always.
Okay, well, thank you both, and we'll proceed with old business. I think we touched upon infrastructure projects and changes in election administration and voting equipment, and that's going to be a priority.
That's going to hit right after the April election. We'll start working on that.
Right.
Hopefully have it done, because we'll have that all in place for 2020.
Exactly. And electronic poll books, it seems like they work well.
Yes.
Okay.
Was there any problems with connectivity this time?
Believe it or not, the the ones that they said they couldn't get a signal, they got a signal on election day. So I think Verizon did a very good job. They went and turned up all the antennas in the city for that. So they did an excellent job. There were some that we had problems with, but we took care of it.
With regard to electronic poll books, I thought that the media view, I think it had a few upgrades. Seemingly had a few upgrades that seemed to work very well. I'd like us to consider down the road, if all the kinks have been worked out, potentially allowing that to be more widespread to give people insight as to kind of how, because in many ways, a lot of it is just a electronic function of what has been done by poll workers and precinct workers for a long time. So it's not new data that's being created, it's a new methodology or mechanism to communicate it. So I would love for us to consider possibly making that public.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Next item is legislation. Mr. Lasker?
We are watching two bills, the bill on Eric and the bill on pretrial detainee voting, that were both vetoed. They have not yet moved during the veto session. The only other bill that we were tracking that's gone anywhere is coincidentally on November 7th, the day after J.B. Pritzker won the governorship. There is a Senate bill that was previously proposed that would have put a statewide advisory referendum on the ballot about recreational marijuana. That has gone back to an election law committee. So that one moved one little step on the day after the election. But other than that, nothing that we're following.
You mentioned something about Eric. Was that about Eric or cross-check?
Well, both.
Both, the use of both.
That we would use Eric and not use cross-check, and that was vetoed but hasn't moved yet in the veto session. Similarly, the pretrial detainee voting bill.
Okay, thank you.
And are we thinking about the next session and what new legislation we would propose?
We're hoping to have both centers on that legislation. So.
How about mail ballots? Do you think that's
I think the big first step that the board, and I hope we can consider adopting the long-range plan to make it a published document, is to get a permanent roster, or at least a 5-year renewable roster where people can sign up once and they'll automatically receive their vote by mail ballot every subsequent election for either 5 years or permanently or whatever.
And that law exists for permanently disabled voters,
right?
but just expanding it to everybody is the idea. That would be a lot less administration on the inside for us. That would actually free up a lot of time for our staff to work on other things.
Okay.
And I know we spoke at a previous meeting about the vote by mail and the signature comparisons and the ability of having Agilis doing something, but we need legislation.
We need legislation so we can update those signatures after every election.
Both so that we could have the Agilis machine do comparisons, and we would then also, if we wouldn't want to do that unless we can use updated signatures. So it's a sort of, that would be a two birds with one stone kind of bill.
Okay, great, thank you. We'll proceed now to new business, and the first item is approval of a contract for Judge of Election Trainer George Munoz for the 2019 municipal elections. Mr. Lasker?
Yes, Mr. Munoz was a longtime employee of the board, and he has mostly retired, but he is very knowledgeable about what happens inside a precinct on election day, and he has returned to the board this past cycle to help train our election judges. As I did mention, we will be doing a limited recruitment effort because we just got most judges appointed to a 2-year term, but there will be some more training both for coordinators and judges. Because he's one of our most experienced, we would like to have a contract for Mr. Munoz to continue providing training in relation to the 2019 elections. Audra Lewicki is our manager of that department, and she said that he would be our only independent contractor trainer. The rest of the training would be done by staff members. But I think Mr. Allen could tell you that he's a very popular trainer, and his judges tend to do pretty well. He makes what we hear is he actually makes the training reasonably fun. So.
Having sat through some of his training sessions, I would endorse that.
All right.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, is there a motion to approve a contract with George Munoz for the sum, at the hourly rate of $65, provided that such payment shall not exceed the total sum of $25,000 over the term of the agreement, which would be November 13, 2018 through November 12, 2019.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes and the agreement is approved. The next item on the agenda is approval of a contract modification with Cardinal Color Group for pre-election household mailings.
So we went out to bid on printing for the household mailing this last summer, and the board did approve a contract with Cardinal Color Group as the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. They actually came in quite below the other printers. The contract expressly has an option for the board in it to extend it to include the 2019 pre-election household mailing. Cardinal did a very good job for us for November here. No reason not to continue moving forward, so we're requesting that you would take that option and extend the contract out to the 2019 pre-election household mailing. Cardinal Color did ask to amend the contract just to allow for the pass-through of any increase to the price of paper that there may or may not be. They said that over the past 5 years, there's been anywhere from a 2 to 5% increase. If there was a 5% increase, they estimate that would actually only increase our total cost by about 1 to 2%, which would still have them be considerably the lowest responsive bidder. And for that reason, we'd like you to extend do the option and extend the contract.
Okay, so is there a motion to extend the contract with Cardinal Color Group, and with the modification that the board would incur the cost of an increase in the price of paper? Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes and the agreement is amended. Next is the legal report. Mr. Lasker?
Election day was pretty smooth, legally speaking. The only real issue, having to hold 5 polling locations open late due to late openings. But one thing that was very nice is one of the judges called back later that night to tell us that every name they had taken, the voters who said they wouldn't be able to make it back by 7 o'clock, every single one of those people did make it back by 8 o'clock. So it just feels good when you know that we've made that possible for them.
About how many people were there?
That was about 12 people at that particular location. There may have been more that showed up after the 7 o'clock, up until the 8 o'clock late holding.
Right.
But the point was that of the names they'd actually taken from people who said they couldn't come back, they all made it back to vote. So good job for them. We are certainly in the midst of preparing for the electoral board. We've got more than 40 potential hearing officers that we've recruited on the list. That includes more than 20 returning ones, but 18 new ones. If we're going to move forward with that many new ones, we've been preparing training sessions specifically for the people who have never served as electoral board hearing officers before. That will be on November 29th in the morning, followed that afternoon by the briefing session for all of the hearing officers that we've been doing on a regular basis. The objection filing deadline is the 3rd of December. The hearings will begin the morning of December 10th. I want to just remind the public that the board has a very helpful guide as to how these electoral board cases work, and that is our Index of Electoral Board Decisions, which has a nice table of contents on different topics and case summaries. And if you're looking at it online on our website, you can then click right on the link and take you to the actual underlying electoral board decisions. Very good place to study up. I'd also like the public to be aware that there's a relatively new publication out there, statewide standards on electoral board rulings. It's created by the nonprofit Citizen Participation Institute, editor Stan Ziegel. Ken Menzel is the general counsel of the State Board of Elections. He and I both have helped review this just to and what Mr. Ziegel's done with the Citizen Participation Institute is gotten his hands on as many electoral board decisions from all around the state as he can and condensed them and summarized them in this one book that's available on the website, citizenparticipation.org. It's a free publication. It's not a replacement for legal advice, but it is a very good introduction into the issues that you need to be careful about when you're preparing your nomination papers, and also how these electoral board cases tend to go. I would certainly encourage candidates to start looking at these materials now. because petition filing starts next week, Monday. That's another thing we're preparing for around here. We're even going to do a little dress rehearsal on that. The hours for our petition filing are going to start at 9 a.m. on the 19th. That's the first day, and that means that everybody who's in line by 9 a.m. will qualify for the ballot placement lottery. We will be open for petition filing 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. on November 19th, 20th, and 21st. We're going to take the day off for Thanksgiving. We'll be back that Friday from 9 to 5. We'll be accepting petitions that Saturday, the 24th, from 9 until noon. We'll be closed on Sunday and then open again the last day, 9 to 5 on the 26th, that Monday. Of course, in the last 2 hours on that Monday, the 26th, anybody who files within those last 2 hours goes into the second ballot placement lottery for the end of the ballot. I want to remind the public that the Board of Election Commissioners has a long-standing policy on apparent conformity review. Anytime a petition is filed, whether it's for candidates or referenda, our staff does an apparent conformity review. No petition shall be certified unless it is in apparent conformity with the mandatory requirements of the Election Code. Several case law from the Illinois Supreme Court on down refer to us as the gatekeeper. We do have the Electoral Board. Our policy says if an Electoral Board objection is filed, we'll go that route and let the Electoral Board rule on it. But for any petitions we receive that, for example, are missing a statement of candidacy or it's not signed, if they don't have the minimum number of signatures, we don't get into reviewing the validity of the signatures, but we count up the total number. There are 12,500 minimum required for the offices, the citywide offices of mayor, clerk, and treasurer. So if somebody files only 10,000 signatures, their petition would not be certified. And of course, other aspects of the mandatory circulator's oath and so forth. So that will be happening in conjunction with the petition filing and the objection filing. And that's keeping us plenty busy in the legal department.
I'm a little concerned about the November 29th training day, because that's a Wednesday or Thursday?
A Thursday.
And my concern is that there may be people who may not be able to make it, and I thought that we used to have training during the weekend.
Well, our concern for us there is that the weekend around those areas is petition filing and objection filing, and we have also been paying the hearing officers to attend these sessions, so we're hoping that they can make it. So, if that becomes an issue, we could reschedule. But so far, with the hearing officers that I've reached out to, the returning hearing officers and some of the new ones to suggest that date, they've been blocking it, and no one has said yet that it would be a problem. So,
Okay,
we'll have
well,
to see how it
I'd
goes.
just like you to keep that in mind, because,
I would agree.
like I said, I think normally we had it on a Saturday or Sunday. And I would like total participation, especially with the new hearing officers.
Right.
You know, we've made such an effort to get hearing officers. I don't want to lose any of them just because of a conflict.
Well, and we've again delayed the appointment of them, so I'm going to reach out to them in mass, and I'll get a response and see how they'll send it as a proposed date and see what the response is. I'll be here on those weekends to be able to do it, so it's just a matter of if the Thursday can work, we'll stick with it. If it doesn't work for everybody, we can reschedule.
Okay. Anything else? Is that it?
That's it. Thank you.
Okay. There is no financial report. We do have public comment. Ms. Carol Marr. Good morning, Ms. Marr. How are you?
Great, thank you. Yeah, I was here after the primary election. I'm so excited to be back again. Good news mostly this time. Thank you for the pay increase for the election coordinators.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, we're almost back to where it was in the beginning, so I'll keep reminding you that 500 would be great. But thank you, the 450 was really appreciated, and I only had to be EC for one of the precincts in our location versus 2 last time, so that was great. And God bless high school students, because I don't know where we would be without them. I also worked early voting again this year, and someone had mentioned that check-in is a problem at early voting, and I would challenge you on that, because that's not the problem. It's the length, it's the amount of time it takes on the touchscreen machines. Check-in is like that. The length of the ballot, the slowness of the machine, the requirements for review of both online and print is what takes a long time. And if you can only fit in 10 touch screens, then you can't go any faster. You can only do, 10 an hour or whatever it is, or 6 an hour. It's the machines, not the check-in. Also, as far as early voting goes, we really need to consider giving people a break. Especially because a lot of us work also election day, and when you've worked 16 straight days or whatever it is, you really need a day off to do your laundry, buy groceries, clean your house, sleep, and you will have spent 2 straight weeks in a room with these people that by the end you really don't like them. So everybody really needs a day, and if you could figure out a way to schedule a break, a full day break for early voting workers, it would really be appreciated. Because you're going to lose people, and these are your most experienced employees. So figuring out a mental health day in there is really critical. I speak from my own mental health. And vote by mail is a big win, and I would challenge you to come up with a stronger message on the notification and tracking that you can do on your vote by mail ballot. I believe voters can see when their vote by mail is received, when it's counted. I think that should be, I'm not sure how you can do that. I think if you look at your sample ballot, it'll tell you that, but that's like hidden in several clicks on the website. I would encourage you to make that sexier and more available on the website so that people can see that it's been received, and because people are skeptical of the USPS.
We are to that point. We are sending out emails now to let people know we've processed your application, you've mailed out the ballot, and we've received the ballot. So we sent out, I think, more than 600,000 emails just related to vote by mail.
Okay.
So there is more of a transactional value because we understand that we don't want people to operate strictly on faith that it's going to get here.
Right. And the good thing about email addresses, they change much less frequency than your home address. So once you have it, it's probably good, as long as you get a good one and all that sort of deal. So that's big time. I think promoting the fact that you can indeed track it, will notify you, I think would help with participation on that. I was the line lady mostly in our early voting site, so I worked the lines and talked to a lot of people that stood in line for a long time. And I really encouraged earlier in early voting, because we were dead for the first week, as well as vote by mail, and people seemed encouraged by that, especially that they could get a notification, so that's a big win. And then finally, on the ballot, on the number of ballot styles, I was in a precinct that had 3 different ballot styles in addition to the RET second page. But I'm experienced, and that was easy for me. I would, perhaps training should consider actually in the training class having like those ballots that you can touch and see what the differences are. Because the training is great, the book is great, but actually seeing how you're going to have these long paper ballots that you have to fill, actually hold and see, that might help drive that home. And I think that's it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, much better this time. Yay.
Yay.
We also have Helene Gavelman. Hi, Helene.
I'm here with my election judge hat on, not legally voter's hat.
Okay.
And I just wanted to comment, I don't know if there's a way you can triage the calling number on election day. We had a minor problem. We didn't have our badges. And we called the hotline every hour and could not get through. We just got constant busies.
Quick question, was that the supplies, or was that here at Election Central?
I called Election Central. I guess I should have called supplies.
Yeah. Because we
Anyway,
had
finally, when the inspector showed up around noon, she went out to her car and got them for us. But, I mean, it wasn't a problem for us. Same 5 judges have been in this precinct, and it wasn't an issue. But I was just frustrated with the fact that I couldn't get through. So I guess I called the wrong number.
it is a problem. We are looking at moving Election Central so we can get some
Get
additional
more
lines
lines.
in, so.
Because if it had been a more serious problem, I could, you know, they
Right.
didn't know that. That's why I'm saying if you had
Understood.
made it clearer, if you've got a serious problem, call X, and if you've got a minor problem, call Y.
And we're gonna increase the number of investigators, so we have one investigator will check, hopefully check every hour, so we're working on
Well,
this.
she used, in prior elections, she came by
She did.
much more frequently. but-
There was some,
Yeah.
in your
But-
area, there was a tie-up.
But
so-
we had, you know, we had great turnout, we had lines to start, and it was a very busy, you know, we processed a lot of voters in our precinct. We had 76% turnout in our
Wow.
precinct, so we got a lot of voters. so.
Okay.
Thank you.
To the point about early voting, not early voting, but the election central, with a number of younger voters turning out, have we given consideration to other means of communicating election issues beyond just telephone calls?
And
Text
it's
messages,
something that we
chats?
want to talk about, because I know Canada, they basically use everything on text message. So it's something that hopefully Jim and I will be able to sit down and go over. Because-
Yeah, the trick, we have a number of phone numbers. Some of them are outdated. They're people's old landlines that they've gotten rid of. So the trick is finding out which ones are landlines and which ones are cell phones that you can actually use for sending messages to. We are using more platforms. I think we tripled our number of followers on Twitter. We still have a long way to go on that. We're receiving and giving out information on Facebook as well. And lastly, to the degree that we can keep up with it, emails as well. So.
Yeah, so I'm suggesting something different that we may want to look at, and this is not necessarily for 19, but for 20 definitely. Having a mechanism as a part of our tracking system. What do we call it now? It's not Ask Ed. It's
The help desk.
The help desk. There you go. Maybe looking to do another level of that where someone could do a live chat and have that live chat feed into that system. Because the Twitter, the Facebook, that's all great for communicating, but in terms of tracking, it's a different kind of thing. So I think that's something, especially as the number of voters have started to grow in that younger demographic, we should really be aggressive about finding ways to make sure that because most folks don't talk. I mean, they communicate through their thumbs, right? The modern day Morse code, I guess, but. I think that's something we should look at for 20 aggressively.
So if I understand you correctly, Commissioner, you're suggesting that people then could contact Election Central via text and not just by phone?
Whatever the mechanism, via text, via chat, via some other, because for example, if you have a problem with your computer, it's like with my Apple computer or what have you, I could call, yes, I can send an email, yes, but I also can do a live chat with a live operator who can respond to me. And so if that's how people are looking, are used to being communicated to troubleshoot, then we need to be in line with that, because the phones, while they are great for one demographic, they may not be as useful for other demographics. And then combined with that, I would probably encourage us to the point about the phones being ringing busy. Maybe we think about with our phones having some mechanism. So like in modern business, I call up, your wait time is so-and-so minutes, so at least it's an expectation, if that can be done. I don't know, it can't be.
It will, once we get our new phone system. I'm trying to put a new phone system into the office also. Once that's in, we'll be there.
Great, so that can handle one side, but I think we need to think about how we communicate this, at least for the goal of 2020.
Let me think about that. There's some trade-offs on that. When doing that with Apple, keep in mind that usually is an indication that one tech is having 5 dialogues at once, and going back, waiting for the person to respond, going back, waiting for the person to respond.
On the live chat.
On the live chat. And on the phone line, it's actually a lot more effective. I can say to you, they're giving out only one ballot style. Boom, the conversation is done. That happens a lot faster than what's the problem, going back and forth, and then, so there are pros and cons to it.
I'm not disagreeing. That's, like I said, it's something that needs to be evaluated. But again, if the citizens that we serve are communicating in a particular way, we need to be thinking about how we communicate that way. When we've evolved to the text message system, we've evolved to the email system for vote by mail, we need to be thinking about this going forward.
And, you know, Commissioner, what I could see is perhaps on our website, if there was an interface, on our help desk program, there's drop-down menus with the kind of concern you're calling with, what the problem might be, and we even have some sample solutions made up for those issues we hear a lot. So if we had an interface on the internet, phones are busy, but maybe they could go to the website, put in the ticket, you know, we'll call you back as soon as we get to your ticket, and they could already categorize it, maybe they could already find their answer. There could be advantages.
Again,
Yeah.
I agree, it's something that needs to be evaluated to keep us in line with where the community we're serving and citizens we're serving are going.
Right.
Well, and
Always.
Yeah.
a lot of the calls to Election Central though are just one way. It's to report electioneering, report the missing supplies or whatever. So like a text message would get around the busy signals on the phone lines, and once there's availability that the message comes through, then we can respond.
Okay.
And so thank you both for your comments. Next item is executive session. Do we have a need for executive session?
Not today.
Okay, great, thank you. And if there is no need for executive session, then we will adjourn to our next regularly scheduled meeting on November 27th, 2018 at 9:30 a.m. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you.